Let's talk about paper. Yes, paper. That flimsy stuff you use for grocery lists or to doodle on during a boring meeting. It seems harmless, doesn't it? But what if I told you that a single piece of paper, just one document, could upend the lives of over 100,000 people? What if the ink on that page could act like a wrecking ball, smashing through homes, families, and futures? It sounds like something out of a dystopian movie, but this isn't fiction, this is history. A stark, painful reminder that the most devastating weapons aren't always bombs or bullets. Sometimes, they're just a few paragraphs signed by a person in a very, very nice office. This isn't some ancient history from a kingdom far, far away. This happened in the United States, the land of the free, the home of the brave. And yet, on February 19, 1942, a piece of paper was signed that would betray those very ideals in a spectacular fashion. It wasn't a complicated legal text full of jargon. It was short, it was direct, and it was catastrophic. This document targeted people not for what they had done, but for who they were. It unleashed a wave of fear, confusion, and injustice that swept up entire communities, leaving a stain on the nation's conscience that, frankly, we're still trying to scrub out today. So, what was this dreadful document? It was called Executive Order 9066. Think of it as the world's worst permission slip. It was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man whose face is literally carved into a mountain. The order was a direct response to the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan a couple of months earlier. The country was scared, angry, and looking for someone to blame. And unfortunately, when powerful people get scared, they often make terrible, terrible decisions. This order gave the military the authority to do something truly shocking, to remove any and all persons from designated military areas. But here's the kicker, the truly insidious part of it all. Who do you think those persons were? It wasn't a random lottery. The order was a thinly veiled excuse to target one specific group of people: Japanese Americans. Over 120,000 individuals, most of whom were American citizens, born and raised on American soil, were about to have their lives turned completely upside down. They were farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, and children. They were Americans. But because of their ancestry, a piece of paper had just declared them a threat. A threat that needed to be removed. Let's look at the order itself. It's shockingly brief for something that caused so much damage. It doesn't even mention Japanese Americans by name. It's a masterclass in bureaucratic doublespeak. It talks about every possible protection against espionage and against sabotage. It sounds reasonable, right? Like locking your doors at night. Except in this case, the government wasn't just locking its doors. It was rounding up its own citizens and locking them away. The order empowered the Secretary of War to create military areas from which people could be excluded. It was a blank check for racial profiling on a national scale. So, how did they justify this? Oh, the justifications were plentiful, and they were infuriating. The official line was military necessity. That's a great phrase, isn't it? It sounds so important and serious. Leaders, including the influential California politician Earl Warren, who would later become a celebrated Chief Justice, argued that there was no way to tell the loyal from the disloyal. They claimed that Japanese Americans living on the West Coast could be secret agents ready to help Japan invade. It was a classic case of fear-mongering, painting an entire community with the broad, ugly brush of suspicion. The process was brutally efficient. First, posters appeared in neighborhoods. They were printed in cold, official-looking block letters, giving families, in some cases, less than a week to get their affairs in order. Imagine that. You have 6 days to sell your house, your car, your business, everything you've spent your life building. You could only bring what you could carry. Families were forced to sell their possessions for pennies on the dollar to opportunistic buyers who knew they were desperate. Heirlooms were abandoned. Pets were left behind. It was a fire sale of an entire community's life and legacy. Then came the removal. People reported to assembly centers, which were often hastily converted racetracks or fairgrounds. Think about that for a second. Families were forced to live in horse stalls, still smelling of manure, while they waited to be shipped off to more permanent camps. They were herded onto buses and trains with armed guards, their destinations unknown. They were stripped of their freedom, their dignity, and their rights as citizens. All because of 99 words on a piece of paper, fueled by racism and wartime panic. It was a betrayal of everything America claims to stand for. The conditions in the 10 main internment camps, located in desolate, remote areas of the country, were grim. These were not holiday resorts. Families were housed in barracks made of tar paper, with no insulation against the scorching summer heat or the freezing winter cold. An entire family would often be crammed into a single small room, with no privacy. They had to share communal bathrooms and dining halls. The camps were surrounded by barbed wire fences and patrolled by armed guards in watchtowers. A constant, menacing reminder that they were prisoners in their own country. The emotional toll was immense. Imagine being a child, torn from your home and friends, and suddenly living behind a fence. Or a parent, unable to provide for your family or protect them from this injustice. People lost their sense of purpose. The traditional family structure was eroded, as everyone ate together in mess halls and parents lost their authority. There were stories of profound depression, of spirits being broken. One internee, a man named Gordon Hirabayashi, famously resisted, saying, "My American citizenship and my conscience did not permit me to do this." He was arrested and jailed for his defiance. There were many stories just like his, stories of quiet suffering and loud protest. Take Fred Korematsu, a 23-year-old American citizen who refused to go to an internment camp. He underwent plastic surgery on his eyes to try and hide his Japanese ancestry and changed his name. He was eventually caught, arrested, and convicted. His case went all the way to the Supreme Court, which, in a decision that is now universally condemned, upheld his conviction, siding with the government's argument of military necessity. It was a legal stamp of approval on a deeply immoral act, a moment where the highest court in the land failed to protect its own citizens. The economic devastation was total and complete. When the war ended and the camps were closed, the internees were released with little more than a bus ticket and about $25. They returned to find their homes and businesses gone, their properties sold or vandalized. They had to start over from scratch, with nothing. The Japanese-American community lost an estimated $400 million in property and income at the time, which would be billions of dollars today. This wasn't just a temporary inconvenience, it was the systematic destruction of a community's wealth and stability, an economic wound that would take generations to heal. The long-term impact of Executive Order 9066 is a powerful and painful lesson. For decades, the injustice was largely ignored by mainstream America. Many former internees were reluctant to speak about their experiences, burdened by a sense of shame or a desire to just move on. It wasn't until the 1980s that a major push for redress began. After years of activism and a congressional investigation that found the internment was a grave injustice motivated by race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership, something finally happened. A new piece of paper was created. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act. This law was an official apology from the U.S. government to the survivors of the internment camps. It also authorized a payment of $20,000 to each living survivor. It was a symbolic and important gesture, an acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done. But no amount of money could ever truly repay the lost years, the stolen property, the broken families, or the deep psychological scars. It was a formal admission that the military necessity was, in fact, a lie. There was never a single documented case of espionage or sabotage by a Japanese American. This whole saga serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile our rights can be. It shows how easily a government, armed with fear and a pen, can turn on its own people. A few sentences, typed up and signed, set in motion a chain of events that caused immeasurable suffering. It wasn't an accident, it was a choice made by people in power, and a choice that had devastating consequences for ordinary people whose only crime was their heritage. They were loyal Americans who were treated like the enemy. And that is precisely why we must always pay attention. It's easy to tune out politics, to think that laws and executive orders are boring things that don't affect our daily lives. But they do. The words written in Washington or in any capital city have real power. They can protect us, or they can imprison us. They can uphold justice, or they can unleash injustice on a massive scale. The story of Executive Order 9066 is not just a sad chapter in a history book. It is a permanent, flashing warning sign. a reminder to question authority, to stand up against prejudice, and to never ever underestimate the power of a single piece of paper.